I'm back in the hot seat. Must have done something right. Kieran's gave me the keys again. Kieran, how you doing? How you settling in over there?
I'm doing well. Always nervous when you've got the keys to the castle, but after your performance the last time, I really shouldn't be. You're a
Nah, listen.
keen pro.
Safe pair of hands.
If you believe that, you believe anything.
Safe pair of hands, mate. All good, are you?
All good. Glad we're getting plenty of news now. All the stuff coming out of training camp. So much hype around certain players that there shouldn't be hype around. But no, big contracts, injuries. How do I put this? Controversy. It feels really much like the NFL is properly back now.
It does, you're right. Every week it seems to be heating up a bit more, getting towards the first games, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's tonight, while we're recording this is Thursday night, we've got the Raiders and I can't believe I forgot who it is. The Hall of Fame game anyway, tonight. So kind of pre-season game, we're starting to get there, it's getting closer, we're getting closer to our league's draft as well. It's all very exciting.
Gives us something to talk about. The first week was like pulling teeth trying to get news, wasn't it? And now we're kind of jam-packed.
That's it. We've got a good guest on the night.
Well, I was going to go into that. Listen, I've been for weeks telling people what it's like to win a championship, and now we've got the reigning champ. There's more rings in here than Argyle Arcade. We've got Drew, the reigning champion of the Fantasy Football League. Drew, my fellow winner, how you doing?
Aye, Shug, I'm all right. I thought I'd come and support you here. You know what I mean? Having a fellow champion on, and I think it should be me and you that's hosting it instead of Kieran. He's no one fuck all.
Aye, we could get Kieran to do a wee Q&A.
Do you know that Piers Morgan video where he walks off set and he's like, right, I've had enough. That's me.
How are you anyway, mate? Good?
I'm fine. I'm on here to settle some scores, to tell some truths, and to slag some people, man.
Listen, you let a championship do the talking. I've heard for weeks guys come on flat their gums about spreadsheets, about so much knowledge about the game, but at the end of the day, they've not won that championship, have they? They're not sitting in that Hall of Fame.
The boy that talks about spreadsheets, the only spreadsheets he knows is the fucking ones on the computer. He's never spreadsheets for anybody, man.
Spread his sheets or spread his cheeks?
He's probably spread his cheeks.
I'll not have that in my podcast. Moving on.
I've took it down.
Moving on, right. Let's go back. Drew, you were, by some quarters, you were criticised for, or slagged for going on auto pick. Mm-hmm. Address the Fantasy Nation. Tell us first of all, tell us how you get into it. We're intrigued by another sort of newcomer. How did you get into the fantasy football? What kind of enticed you to get involved in this league?
So I probably kind of owe this all to Kieran. For a good few years, Kieran had been saying to me, look, why don't you come and do this? Why don't you come and do this? You'll really enjoy it. And every year I was like, aye, all right. And then it would get to the time that Kieran was organising it, and I was always doing something that I couldn't actually do it. And then this time Kieran said to me, look, why don't you do it? And I was like, you know what? Let's do it then. You know what I mean? I went to Kieran's house and watched a good few Super Bowls, and like I always enjoyed it when I did watch it, but like sitting down and watching individual games kind of never took my fancy. I wasn't like very, very invested in it, like Kieran and yourself and other boys in the chat and stuff like that. But I was like, right, okay, I'll get into the fantasy and I'll see obviously how it does for me. And I mean, Kieran's wife and all that was like, you'll get really invested in it. And I was like, nah, no way. I won't get like that. And it just turns into an absolute habit, and you just like you look for it every Sunday, you know what I mean? And then I was up till 3-4 in the morning watching the Monday games, and then me and Kieran would be over at each other's house and like pure engrossed in it, like watching our players. It's really, really good, and I would encourage everybody that's kind of I don't know, sitting on the fence about it. I would definitely encourage them to kind of take the plunge and go for it.
Yeah, you make a good point there, Drew, when you say the thing about 3 a.m, because if we've got any listeners from across the pond in the States that maybe don't realise some of the sacrifices that we make when it becomes such an obsession and your game is really tight, it's on a knife edge, you are kind of having a wee peek during the night, waking up during the night to see how have I got on. It does become obsessive.
It definitely does. The one that I was disappointed about was like the last game of our season was the Raiders versus the Chargers, and obviously it was Steve-O versus me in the final. Steve-O had Hunter Renfro, and I had Eckler, Jared Cook, and like obviously the Eckler and Hunter Renfro were going kind of toe to toe, I think, weren't they? And then obviously the Raiders just won it in the last minute, but I think I won it by, I don't know, 2 points or something like that, and I think there was something controversial in it, that something happened with Renfro, that he should have got something, or something happened with Eckler, and it kind of ended up making me win it. But I wish I was at yours that night, Kieran, remember?
That's right.
And we had to go to bed. we were like, watching the game, falling asleep.
Not together before any rumours start.
I slept in a different bed.
Well, again, each to their own. Each to their own.
No, but it is good. It is one of these things, and you are a very good example, Drew, of like this week, for example, we've invited a lot of people in to come into like the second division of our league, and a lot of the guys have never played fantasy football before, but they've had a vested interest in the NFL and the games. And the single one thing that we hear all the time is, I've not got a clue what I'm doing. What do I do? So for you, coming from that angle, like what kind of advice would you give folk that want to get into it but don't know what they're doing?
Obviously, when we done the draft, I had actually had COVID, so I missed it on the Friday. And probably up to the day of the draft, I was kind of like, I don't know if I should really do this. I might embarrass myself. Don't really know what I'm doing. And then I was saying to Kieran, like, what do I look at? He's like, just go and listen to things, look at things. And one tool that was actually great for me, and it is actually great with stuff like this, is I use TikTok. I just went on, searched fantasy football on TikTok, listen to it. The clips are so short and they're literally straight to the point, give you players' names. I wrote big list of wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, players to look out for. And then during the draft, I just kind of worked my way through those players. So no auto pick was involved, apart from the first one, because I didn't know how the app was working. And luckily, the auto pick picked Jonathan Taylor for me. So that was an absolute steal and a half. But he was on my list.
I heard you say the words COVID and then missing the draft, and I thought, maybe is this a tainted title? Is that what Kieran's getting at?
It should have get finished a couple of months in. You know what I mean? And the title get handed to probably Toasty. Or better watch, he'll be putting that in. He'll be putting an appeal in.
The commissioner won't be listening anyway.
What did you say?
But I have to say, we talked about obviously the draft order, and I get royally shafted in that as well. I was supposed to be.
Listen, didn't we all? Didn't we all?
I ended up second last.
Didn't we all?
Listen, this is a heavy shot. See, when you're the commissioner, you've got guys to look after. Number one being yourself. So no, listen. I sent a picture into the chat last night. The draft order is set. I actually know what mistake I made now, but I'll not tell you that. But it's set. We're good to go. And you're actually second pick, Drew. Am I right in saying that?
Yep, I'm second.
Who are you picking?
Oh, well, I'll maybe discuss that in the podcast later on.
Oof.
Sorry, our last intro question for you is, do you have an NFL team?
So, actually, there's a funny story to this, and I was actually thinking about it this week. So, a couple of years ago, when I would go over to Kieran's house and Kieran would have it on at Christmas time and things like that, I started to get quite interested in it. And actually, my team at that point, it wasn't really a team. I kind of liked the player. And I was like, I quite like him. And it was just something different that I'd never seen before. It was actually Cam Newton. And at the time, he played the Carolina Panthers. And it was this time the Carolina Panthers were absolutely storming ahead. I don't think they made the playoffs, so they didn't make the Super Bowl at all that year. I can't even remember. I only watched a couple of games, but he was brilliant. I thought it was amazing. This big, tall, physical, strong guy, you know what I mean, playing like this. I thought it was amazing. But coming into this this fantasy league, I found out that Toasty was a Carolina Panthers fan, so there is no way in hell that I'm supporting the Carolina Panthers. So I would say no, I've definitely not got a full affiliation with one set team.
Why don't we put it out on Twitter or on our socials, whatever the commissioner wants to do, and we ask the listeners to vote for who your team's going to be.
Happy with that.
Yeah, so what we need you to do, Drew, right?
Uh-huh.
Pick 4 teams, we'll put it to a poll on one of our socials, right?
Right.
So we'll clip this up, take it away. This is your plea to the nation. They need to pick who you support, and that's who you'll support for the rest of your NFL journey, right?
Right, that's fine. That's fine. Do you want me to choose them now?
Go for it.
Right, so...
Don't pick the Panthers, or Toasty will set up like 200 ghost accounts, bots, and he'll be just keep voting.
There is no way in hell that the Panthers are one of my decisions after Toasty. He's my enemy in this league. There's no way I can join sides with him. So I would probably... I need to stay with my boys for last year. Like Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford, they practically won me the fantasy league last year. So I would choose the Rams as one of them. Also, Austin Eckler, he was a hero for me last year as well. So I would go to Chargers. And then I actually, you know what I mean? Obviously, those two teams are quite decent. I think you need to have a wee bit of a rubbish team in there. So we'll go and put the New York Giants in there as well.
I don't know whether to take offence to that or not.
And then for the last one, I'm going to put the Pittsburgh Steelers in there.
Oof.
And the Steelers, because the TV program This Is Us is set in Pittsburgh, and it's one of my favourite TV programs of all time, and they absolutely love the Steelers. So I'll go ahead and say the Steelers. So that's the 4 there.
I'd love it if it was the Steelers, just because we ask that question every time we get a guest on that, what made you support the Steelers? And you'd be like, you know that programme that was on Netflix? This Is Us. Absolutely nothing to do with anything the Steelers have ever done apart from they're in that programme.
Exactly. And I quite like their coach, their wee coach guy that's at the side of the park. Is that not the old guy with like the white beard? Is that the like...
Don't think he's at the Steelers, man.
No, is it though? Oh, right, okay, we'll clip that bit out, right?
Oh, man.
Stay tuned for the poll to decide Drew's team for the rest of his days.
We should set up a Just Giving page at the same time so they can buy me a shirt and send me it as well.
I'll tell you something, you won't be recognising the street. Is that dial-up internet that you're using?
I tell you what, you can tell Drew's your family, Kieran, trying to get something for free on the first podcast.
Is that not what this is for?
Right, moving on, guys. A lot of news this week. A lot to get through. Now, first of all, let's deal with the contracts. DK Metcalf, 3-year extension of $74 million. Ends his sort of contract sitting. Kieran, I'll come to you first. Does this mean his fantasy stock goes up? Will that guarantee he'll play? Or is it still quite mediocre given the quarterback situation at the Seahawks?
Mediocre for me, it really is. He deserves every penny of what he's got. It's a fantastic contract. When you get a wide receiver like that, that's, what is he, 6'4", 6'5", he can literally play against anybody. He's as fast as lightning, I think. Yeah, I think he ran somewhere between a 3.3 and a 3.4 for his 40-metre dash. And then was that highlight reel when they threw an interception and he chased back and brought the defender down. And then he had trials for the 200-metre American national team for the Olympics. Yeah, lightning quick as well. I just don't know if it puts his stock up. But at the same time, the flip side of it is I can see him being the Seahawks Deebo Samuel of this year, where he's pretty much the guy that does everything. Tyler Lockett fell away towards the last part of last season. Russell Wilson leaving as well. So you're looking at Geno Smith or Drew Lock being in at quarterback. And you're very much dependent, if you're a wide receiver, in that sense, of someone that can actually get the ball to you. The one thing that could change it for me is as if they trade for Garoppolo. Right. I think, yeah, for anyone that's been linked with Garoppolo, I feel that the Seahawks are the one that seem the most solid link. If that was to happen and you're looking at a quarterback like Garoppolo that likes to throw the ball around, he's not really got much in the running game with Carson retiring and things being a wee bit clear at running back. So yeah, looking at DK Metcalf being that Cordarrelle Patterson or that Deebo Samuel, the guy that does everything for them. I'm not quite sure. If things change, Garoppolo comes in, then yes, I think his stock goes up. But at the moment, for me, still very mediocre.
I tend to agree with you there on that one. I don't think you can argue. I think until the quarterback situation changes, if it does, I think in reality, Seahawks, I don't think anybody's predicting anything great off them this year. Keeping Metcalf's in more investment for kind of the season after. I think this season is going to be very mediocre. I don't think anybody's really worth too much in fantasy football this year on their side.
I totally agree with you.
Moving on then, you mentioned this man, Deebo Samuel, new contract. He was unhappy about kind of playing his varied positions last year and, as you said, doing a bit of everything. Does this make him less liable as a fantasy top 20 pick? Drew, what do you think?
Well, for me, obviously Deebo at the tail end of last season, you know what I mean? He was wide receiver, he was running back, for me, his value hinges on the carries for me. Because I feel like with Trey Lance, you know, he's probably untested at the present moment, isn't he? Because he was out quite a bit last season with injury. Am I right in saying with obviously Jimmy G coming in? So I feel like with Deebo, his value definitely hinges on the carry. But I was listening to a few things this week, and it seems like they're going to continue with Deebo that way, the way he left off, because he had some turnaround in form at the tail end of last season. I know Kieran obviously had him last year in his team, and the amount of points that he got was unbelievable. And Deebo actually last season he was the third highest wide receiver with most touchdowns, just behind Cooper Kupp and Mike Evans. So yeah, I would definitely say he's up there. But the difficult thing as well with the 49ers is they're a very, very run-heavy team. You know what I mean? They've got, obviously, if Deebo's going to do, obviously, wide receiver and he's going to be a pass-catching running back or whatever, you've obviously got Eli Mitchell as well there. So it just really, where is he going to fit in? Is he going to get as many carries as he did last season with Eli Mitchell coming back? Who knows? But for me, in the 49ers, he's probably the safest bet in their offense to take in terms of fantasy.
100% agree with a lot of the stuff you said there. And talking about is he going to carry as much, actually in the contract, there's a sort of top up of $1.95 million. And over the course of that, it'd be a collection of things coming together, and you'd be looking at something around the terms of 650,000 of that for each year. He's got over 380 rushing yards and an extra 150,000 on top of that if he scores 3 rushing touchdowns in a year. So his contract is made up around him featuring in that position. In terms of fantasy, I like him. I really do like him. His ADP is currently 18. I can't really see him going higher than that in terms of the running backs that go ahead of him and the wide receivers that kind of go ahead of him in terms of guys like Kupp, like you were saying there, Drew. But everybody talked about his rushing yards last year, and that made up the bulk of his points. But I think when you look at what he scored as a wide receiver, he was right up there with his points as well. So the only thing for me at the moment, and a guy you mentioned there, Drew, Eli Mitchell, I fully expect this to be his breakout year. I fancy him to do so well. Last year it was slightly running back by committee at the 49ers, but I expect Mitchell to do well. So if I don't get Samuel, hopefully down the line I'll be looking to get Mitchell.
Well, guys, let's move on. Let's look at the injuries because there's quite a number to get through. It is obviously that time of year, sort of training's ramping up. It's a lot of blows to teams, and it's one thing about the NFL, isn't it? It's a season can quickly change with a big injury. Seen it a few times last season. The likes of Chris Carson obviously got a really bad one. Tim Patrick, standout wide receiver, season-ending ACL this week. Where does this leave the Broncos, Kieran?
I think they're still doing okay in terms of their wide receiver core. When you look at guys like Jerry Jeudy, who done well last year in his rookie year, and you look at Courtland Sutton, who's just came back from a similar injury that Tim Patrick's just have, their targets are going to go up. Their ADP is going to go up. They're going to be selected higher in the league, and there's no reason not to. They've now got Russell Wilson at quarterback. I think there was a lot of focus put on the wide receiver and the offense at the Broncos because they still get Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams at running back. So they are pretty much loaded there, but they're now on the cusp of, right, what if we get 1 or 2 injuries here? Then we're in trouble. Then you're looking at Russell Wilson putting the team on his back and trying to carry them. But Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton certainly become so much more fantasy viable now. Their stock's going to go through the roof. Like us, we try and leave our draft as close to the league start as possible because of these type of injuries. So although their ADP might be low just now, I don't actually have a note at it, unfortunately. I think their stock goes up, their value is going to be a lot higher. And I wouldn't hesitate in, well, both of them are very talented. Jeudy and Sutton are very talented. I wouldn't hesitate in drafting any of them, given a chance.
Judy, somebody who spoke quite a bit on the pod on the last couple of episodes. What's your thoughts, Drew? Where you seen the Broncos? How do you see them doing this season? And is there anybody you're looking at there for your fantasy team?
Well, definitely bringing in Russell Wilson like that is massive. I think, you know what I mean. They were, I think, watching them last season, it looked to me that they were crying out for somebody like that. Teddy Bridgewater, I heard Pollock a couple of weeks ago saying that, you know what I mean, he'll be okay. Where's he now? From last season, I just felt like they definitely had to bring in like a big name. You know what I mean? Because especially, you know what I mean, years and years ago, obviously seeing like Manning and things, they had to bring in somebody. So I had Tim Patrick last year. It didn't really do much for me. So looking at the 3 wide receivers for them this year, I would have probably put him number 3, if I'm being totally honest with you, and I would have taken the 2 ahead of him. So having him out is not a big issue, I think, for fantasy people. But in terms of like obviously having Jeudy and Sutton, definitely puts their stock massively up. And I'm glad that Toasty's not in this year, because he'd probably be like, "Oh, Drew will probably select Tim Patrick even though he's injured, blah 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 blah, auto pick you."
All comes back to Toasty from.
I know. I love the personal battle.
Anyway, moving on. Big blow for the Bucks. Ryan Jensen, the centre, injured. Maybe out for some time. May not feature at all this season. It's a big blow. It's a team we're looking at has been quite strong. Drew, how does this affect the fantasy? How does it affect the fantasy value of the Bucks offense of players, including Brady?
You know what I mean? For me, Tom Brady is the absolute goat, isn't he? Like, he's the best there is for me anyway. Like, he's got it all. He's got the rings, he's got the bird, and he's literally like the brand of the NFL. Like, you've got Michael, like LeBron, he's NBA. You know what I mean? Ronaldo, he's football, but Brady's like the brand of the NFL. Everybody knows Brady. Like, he's definitely the best out there for me, but I'll ask you a question. Think you could avoid Martin and tag football? I'm not so sure, but yeah, but like for Brady, like I feel like you could do anything to him and he'll still have a way to get out of it. And looking at how stacked like the Bucks offense is this year with the players that they brought in, I think his value is probably untouched, if I'm being honest with you, because I think he's that good. He could really do. He could do whatever. He could deal with it.
I mean, my only thing on that, I mean, Brady's comments this week, he said nobody knows what the team is going to look like. He said, you think you have a centre and he gets injured. So the team is different in one day. There's a long time between now and the first game. So Kieran, that sounds a good bit. Obviously, there's going to be a good bit of uncertainty around the team. It throws everything up, like we spoke about at the start, like in injuries. But who for you can step up?
No, it's a shame that Jensen's going to be out for so long. For how important he is to the Bucks, he's basically the leader of that O-line. He's going to have big shoes to fill. Like you say, there is guys there that can step in. There's a lot of pressure on them to step in. When you're the guy that's snapping the ball to Brady every game, it's got to be perfect. But he's resilient, he's a leader. They might look elsewhere in free agency to try and bring someone in, but it does put a wee bit of a dampener on the Bucks going into this season, having just signed Julio Jones, and a wee bit excited to see them. But their focus has now got to be how long they can keep the ball in Brady's hands, how long that O-line can keep defensive players off of him, and that is very important for 45-year-old Tom Brady. I still fancy him to be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this year. I wouldn't go drafting them high. I think there is better options out there, but like Drew touched on, it's Tom Brady.
One player I'm actually looking forward to seeing in the Bucks is Russell Gage. Actually, I think he'll be a great addition. I think you had him last year, Shug, didn't you?
Yep.
And like he scored good amount of points, man. Like at points that nobody expected him to. And I thought I was looking in today, and I think the depth that they've got in their wide receivers, I think it's really good, and that's why I was kind of fancying Brady to do pretty well. You know what I mean this year.
Anyway, moving on. We've covered the contracts. We've covered the injuries. Next topic, not one we want to spend too much time on and get too into for this pod, but Deshaun Watson handed only a 6-game ban. As I said, we don't need to get into ins and outs, but a disgrace that, guys, to say it lightly. Am I right?
Yeah, I think it's an absolute embarrassment on behalf of the Browns and the NFL for that matter. I know the NFL have now appealed it. Yeah. I think it's going to end up being a bit of a tricky legal battle between the Browns, Deshaun Watson, and the NFL. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it. But without diving into it too much, like you said, Shug, he then becomes fantasy relevant.
Yep.
I know morally probably not correct, but people are going to draft him. It's at the end of the day, they become fictional characters, and he's not certainly someone I'd be going and drafting right away. He's going to miss the first 6 to 8 games. So there is going to be someone drafts him, stashes him, and takes the risk that he might end up being a very good quarterback for them, depending on how he does at the Browns. When you look at the receiving core, Mari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, they've also got Kareem Hunt at running back as well, Nick Chubb. They're a very good side, the Browns. I know that's kind of contradicting something I said in a previous episode. When you look at it in that sense, if they had Watson at quarterback, they're going to be a very good team. Not one I hope a lot of folks start to support. I hope it's the other way about, that people turn their back on them. But when you look at his receiving core and what he's got round about him, Kareem Hunt, very good pass catching running back as well, and Njoku, and at tight end as well. So with Watson at quarterback, there becomes a lot of fantasy relevant players there.
That's it. I mean, the sort of appeals process, let's just let that take its course. But as you said, it seems as if it's still got a bit to go, and we wonder what the NFL, how they'll kind of go about it. But we know what we all think they need to do. But I think you made a good point there. In terms of fantasy football, I don't really see any issue in people drafting them. I mean, from our side, it's a game. It's not really, we shouldn't be looking through every single player and saying, what's he done off the field? It's a game for us on that side. And you made some good points. With uncertainty, would you think he's worth a kind of punt, Drew?
Well, I was kind of looking at it today, and probably in terms of Deshaun Watson, obviously you're going to probably be able to pick him up pretty late on with him missing the first 6 games. So possibly to give yourself better picks in maybe the early rounds, maybe going for another quarterback that you can maybe get later on, that's maybe get a good first 6 game matchup, put him in for the first 6 games, and then bring in Deshaun Watson for obviously the remainder. Might be a good strategy, because then obviously if you're not picking up a top tier quarterback, you can obviously pick up a top tier, like a semi decent wide receiver or running back. One of the ones I kind of looked at was actually Justin Fields. His ADP is 120. And looking at his kind of first round of ties, like for the first 6 games, he's got the Chiefs, the Seahawks, the Browns, the 49ers, the Packers, and the Texans. And going on last season, you've got the Chiefs there and you've got the Packers, but none of them are really great against the passing game last year. So possibly bringing somebody in like Justin Fields would maybe be good for like the first six games of the season, and then obviously shipping him out and bringing in Deshaun Watson if it doesn't get extended with the NFL.
See, Kieran, this guy's done his homework. NFL fantasy championships are not one in luck.
I put everything I've got in it. It doesn't seem to work out for me.
You did a lot last year, Kieran.
So half that ring's mine.
Aye, all right.
Next up, James Washington, potentially out for the Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb's stock, did it just go through the roof, Kieran?
Last year he was a guy that was highly tipped by all the experts to shine. I don't know if that was off the back of Hard Knocks, and we're going to start to see the things with someone like Amon St. Brown at the Lions, because they're featured in Hard Knocks. But CeeDee Lamb, didn't really hit the heights which was expected last year in terms of what he's got around him. There's not really much now that the Cowboys and Dak Prescott have got to pick from. They lost Amari Cooper in the summer. They've now lost Washington, who they brought in from the Steelers, who I thought had a very decent season last year. And Michael Gallup coming back from, if I'm not wrong here, an ACL injury, or it might be a Liz Frank, I'm not quite sure the ins and outs of it. I actually think it's Washington it's got the Liz Frank injury. But the targets in which Cooper and Gallup accumulated last year, I think, are around about 160 targets. So you're looking at CeeDee Lamb, or you're looking at someone else within that depth chart to step up and really fill that slot. There is opportunity there at the Cowboys.
I think I said it last week. I think the Cowboys are going to have a good season. CD now becomes an even stronger draft pick for me. Drew, you agree? Are you taking anybody from the Cowboys?
Yeah, most definitely. I quite like CeeDee Lamb. And one guy I was trying to get a lot last year because I could see him starting to break through was Tony Pollard. I was one of the ones that was on at Martin consistently to try and get him because he obviously had Amari Cooper and Tony Pollard, and I thought taking one of them off his hands would have been decent. And I thought Tony Pollard, had a great season as an RB2. He could definitely challenge Elliott, I think, well this year, and I think Tony Pollard's share will go up massively this year. CeeDee Lamb last year, I think he kind of flattered to deceive a wee bit, didn't he? Started off pretty well and then tailed off a wee bit. And then he was one of the players in your trades with Toasty that he was trying to entice you with, But that's when he started to go on his wee downward spiral. But I think touching on the Cowboys of last season, for me, they should have been well ahead. You know what I mean? I expected them to be in the late rounds of like the playoffs and things like that. Obviously, they had that Dak done that weird thing in the last remaining few seconds. Nobody could understand what he was doing, and I think with obviously just really watching it last year, Dak is a great quarterback. I think he is really good. I'm not much as fan of him as Martin is, but he's definitely up there, and I think with CeeDee Lamb, this could be their year.
And listen, guys, with two champions on, we might as well go through it, and with the draft coming up, let's go through our draft strategy.
Do you want me to do Drew's?
Yep.
What pick?
Good luck.
Well, Kieran, let's start with you. Probably a guy the most experience in there. Obviously not. Never got a championship. But in terms of years played, what strategy do you favour most? What's your kind of thinking going into a draft?
I'm always interested in taking a risk when it comes to my draft, but I never actually do it. I'm always just interested in it. Bog standard advice on anyone that's getting just into the fantasy football and they're looking to do their homework and draft, and I think I said this to Drew last year, try and read up on a few articles on draft strategy. The most common thing tends to be you draft the top tier running backs as high as you can. Yep. Try and get your top tier running back. Either you take your first round running back, second round running back, see what falls to you at third, and take the best player available, whether it be a wide receiver or a running back, or you would be talking top tier quarterbacks in terms of Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen if you're ready to grab a quarterback at the third round. But drafts tend to be running back heavy, and I like it when folk try and go with something different. I stumbled across something called the Hero RB draft strategy. Basically what it is that you would take your Hero RB, whether it be the first round or the second round, and he's your ride or die running back. He's your top tier running back, the best that you can get. And the reason for it is, I said, don't put too much draft capital into your running backs. Try and pick up some of your top tier wide receivers. Also with that, running backs within the NFL are the most injury prone players in the game. Wide receivers average higher point scoring on a weekly basis per game as well. So the average that you're going to get from a running back is 12 games per season. The average you'll get from a wide receiver is 14 games per season, which makes me think this could actually work if you're brave enough to take the chance on drafting one running back in the higher rounds and start to try and pick away at the elite wide receivers, which there is a lot more of them than there is the right running backs.
Yeah, I think I'm similar. My strategy, I think I'd always been told, kind of go for your running backs first. But for me, especially if you're later in the picks, you might see a wide receiver, one of the top wide receivers there. You want to grab them.
Yeah.
So, and for me, quarterbacks are starting to become more and more relevant over the last few years in fantasy. And I think when I kind of got into it, the advice was that your quarterback, not that it wasn't important, but get your wide receivers, get your running backs sorted first. But I don't think you can really question if somebody looks fairly early at a quarterback. But Drew, talk us behind your method of your madness. Is it just who's dancing about in TikTok?
That's pretty much it. Who's getting the best answer that day? No, like for me, I can only really go on what kind of worked for me last season. And before Kieran says it, no, not auto pick. Like I drafted two really, really good running backs, and Jonathan Taylor and
Austin Eckler.
Austin Eckler. Both of them. They were out the whole NFL. They were the highest touchdown scorers with 20 each touchdowns last season. And that game, Kieran, we watched when Jonathan Taylor scored 5 touchdowns. That was just like, what am I like? This is unbelievable here. So
It was me against you that week.
I don't know if it was that one, was it?
Between Eckler and JT, they had 9 touchdowns, and I've got no idea how I managed it, but I actually beat you that week.
I know.
That's my proudest moment last year, and that says a lot, eh?
You got a ring? No, but like for me, it definitely worked going running back heavy. But I think probably one thing as well is like I got Cooper Kupp, and I can't even remember how late I got Cooper Kupp, but he definitely wasn't in my first maybe 3-4 picks. I think he was a wee bit later on than that. So there is definitely a few hidden gems out there that you can definitely pick up. And one bit of advice I would definitely give to people is after your draft, don't panic. Definitely don't panic. I lost my first 3 games of the season. And then obviously because I was obviously right down the bottom of the league, I could pick up all the really good guys off the waivers that were looking to they were doing really well in the season at the beginning. So this is all the stuff that you can use to your advantage. If you're not happy with your team, don't do a shrug and trade your whole team away in the first week.
Hey, got a ring?
I know.
I'm right in saying you, like me, Drew, we both lost our first 3 games.
Yeah.
Took a heavy slagging within the chat, but there is method to the madness. That doesn't mean that I meant to lose the games, but I wasn't all too bothered. In any other fantasy league, whether it be like the EPL one, which I absolutely detest, because when you lose games, it's hard to kind of pick a team like everybody else has, etc. But after the first 3 weeks of the NFL season, you start to see the players that are kind of on the periphery of emerging as breakthrough talent, and you've got the first pick in your waivers. If it works like us, it is a snake draft, and your drafting order is last to first. So it's not all bad if you lose your first few games. Hang in there and be a good sort of league mate in that sense that you're not just chucking it when you've competed against everyone else, and then later in the season everyone's pretty much got a bye because you're not willing to log into your app. That's the worst thing that you could do within fantasy. But getting the wee waiver picks, I mean, I picked up Cordell Patterson last year and it springboarded me. I made the playoffs. And that's the type of thing that you look for. I also picked up Eli Mitchell.
Who beat you in the playoffs, Ian?
Don't know.
It was me, mate. I think one thing that I'll probably look to do this year in the draft is possibly handcuff some running backs as well. One that I can definitely think off the top of my head that I don't know how he'll do because he's not played many games over the past 2 years is Saquon. Whoever's RB2 at the Giants, he could definitely feature a good amount. So stuff like that, is always good to do, even in the later rounds. If you're struggling for players, then pick up somebody like that. They probably will get a few points.
Well, it's going to be interesting. We've got the draft coming up. We're going to do it. We're all meeting in the Record Factory. And listen, I can confirm the only way I'll be panicking is if there's no chicken wings. A last bit, let's talk about it. Let's have a bit of fun. Rank your American football movies of all time. Drew, I'll come to you first.
Right.
What's your top three?
A top three?
Top three, let's go.
Right. So
Everybody put top three.
I had a really, really good think. And to me, this is definitely the best one. And I don't think anybody can argue with it. And I'm going serious here. I'm looking at Shug. Shug's starting to laugh. He's definitely putting up bloody the Waterboy is number one or something like that, right? But
That's me.
number one for me has to be Remember the Titans.
Oh, good one.
That's great. Denzel, Ryan Gosling, great story behind it and everything like that. I think that's definitely up there. Number two.
Not for me. There's no wrestlers in it. It's not The Longest Yard.
Oh, God's sake. That's
No Captain Insano in it either.
Wait, going slightly off track here, right? Do you know that Paul White, the guy that's the Big Show, has now obtained branding rights to bring Captain Insano to AEW? So he's actually going to be a thing. But no, Drew, Remember the Titans. You're completely wrong.
No, Remember the Titans, definitely up there. Denzel. Number two, Oscar winner, The Blind Side. What a movie.
Got to be we on that one.
Very, very good movie. True story as well, I'm right in saying, isn't it?
Yep.
Pretty sure. And number three for me, it's a very, very true reflection of the NFL. It has to be The Gridiron Gang with a great movie. Really, really enjoyed that one.
Decent. Keelan, what you throwing at us?
I'm not much of a serious movie guy. I'm not someone that looks into things like Oscars and awards and things that you'd really need to focus on because my attention span's so small.
Yeah.
If it makes me laugh, I'm into it. The Longest Yard, I love the Longest Yard. Pretty much the American football version of the Mean Machine. Am I right in saying that? It's based around the same book. It's got all the wrestlers in it. Stone Cold. Need I say more? I can't really rank them. I'm not a big movie guy. I love The Waterboy. I absolutely love The Waterboy. I've my list here. Would you guys class Ace Ventura as an American football movie?
I wouldn't really, but loosely you could say it, aye. But nah, I wouldn't.
Number 10 on my list was Glee, so I would count it as a American football movie.
Have you ever seen The Little Giants?
I've not
actually.
But I know what one it is, aye.
That was one of these classics I used to rent out the video shop when I was younger. And just absolutely love it. Total family movie. What was the movie? The Sean Payton one, that was on Netflix recently.
Home Team.
Home Team, brilliant man, absolutely brilliant movie. I think that slides under the radar a wee bit.
I cannot believe any given Sunday's no dimension yet.
See, I did watch Any Given Sunday, and I'm probably comparing it to Remember the Titans, and it's definitely nowhere near as Remember the Titans.
I like it. Al Pacino, Shagger.
Yeah, Drew mentioned The Waterboy. Adam Sandler's the king of American football movies. The Waterboy for me is brilliant. Do you know the coach that nobody understands? There's always one of them in every team, isn't there?
That was my dad.
The best scene ever of that is in the classroom when he's like, "Mama's wrong again."
Do you know who else I love in it? See the guy that's got the squint? Bobby turns up, is it the frog legs he's got? And he answers the door and he said something, he said, "Mama set me up with this." And he's like, "Ha, you just crack a joke, Bobby."
Listen, I think there's a major listen. I can't disagree with The Blind Side, Waterboy in there. There's also Friday Night Lights for me, although the season was much better.
Yeah.
The movie's still good. Listen, one that gets no credit. I watched it in a plane once. The Game Plan.
Oh, that's a brilliant one.
The Rock's class, man. The music's in it tremendous. A wee bit of Elvis. He's called Joe Kingman in it. Calls himself the King. He's class. He's class. That's not seen it.
What's the Kurt Warner one that came out recently? I downloaded it to watch it in a flight and never actually got around to it.
American Underdog.
That's it. Meant to be brilliant. I think it is 7.2 on IMDb.
A steady 7.2.
Put your one to watch list, guys.
Aye.
That's it. I was sticking with The Waterboy's number one.
No,
think-
definitely not, man.
I think we'll put it out to our chat, we'll put it out to the socials, see what they think, but for me, I think it looks as if we're kind of coming to an agreement that The Waterboy is the greatest American football film ever made.
Christ.
We should get a statue. Get a statue outside my house. Bobby Boucher, just in the plaque in the bottom, just says the GOAT.
We should ask Adam Sandler to come in the pod, he's in everything else.
It'll bring all the same cast as well. It seems to be the same cast in every movie.
All his pals in it.
What a life. How good would that be, though?
He's well, always a different American sport, but he's some basketball player. You seen him playing basketball?
He's some golfer as well. Happy Gilmore.
You ever seen a guy drive a ball 300 yards with a hockey stick, son? Oh man, we should do a sports movie podcast.
We should actually. Movie review night. Aye, this is for another pod. Let's get it penciled in.
I tell you who won't be making a movie, it's me. The amount of technical difficulties we've had tonight's unbelievable.
No, Spielberg Wallace out there.
I'm more ET than I'm Spielberg.
Anyway, on that note, Kieran, you've got a lot of editing to do. It's going to be another late night. We appreciate the work you do for the pod. I just come on here, talk a load of rubbish, and then pass it over to you to do the work. So it's appreciated, but let's wrap things up to get you to bed by, say, 2 a.m. tonight. It's been a great show. Guys, thanks a lot. Drew, thanks a lot for joining us. Great guest.
No worries at all, boys. Anytime. And I'll try and not muck up with my headset the next time if I get allowed back on.
No, your hair's all over the place, man. At least you've got hair. I know what's coming. At least I didn't auto-pick my draft, eh?
At least I've got a ring, mate.
And Kieran, absolute stalwart as always.
It's a pleasure having you at the helm. It's been fun, as usual. Apart from all the difficulties I've had tonight, it's been a great laugh. Drew's been a brilliant guest. Really done his homework. I'm quite impressed, actually.
Yeah, it was good.
It's probably one to watch in the draft this year. It'll be interesting to see what he does now that he knows what he's talking about.
100%. The TikTok king. I'd like to see your screen time.
Oh, I would do. I'd like to see yours full of porn.
For fuck's sake.
For God's sake.
I edit that bit.
Anyway, guys, thanks again. We'll wrap up, and thanks to all the listeners. See you next week.
Butterfly toasty.